All right, thank you everybody for joining today. As I assume you're all aware of, this is our stakeholder meeting for the first quarter of 2023 today. Our agenda is going to look a little something like this. I've got just a couple of quick intro and update slides for you all. Going to do just a small icebreaker activity. We got our presentation by Curt Storlazzi, and have any questions and answers after that. And then we've got a quick anonymous survey we would like everybody to fill out with respect to the EIG. But for those of you that are not aware, the vision for this group is to foster community to facilitate innovation for coral reef restoration. And we try and define that with our community guidelines, which we have updated as of this month for 2023, and hope to guide us through the next year. We'll send those out to everybody at the end of this meeting with the recording and everything if anyone wants to check it out. And these stakeholder meetings are just, we aim to use them to increase opportunities for collaboration and networking, while just trying to get a heads up of what is going on out there in the world of coral restoration. So we're really happy to have all of you here today. Happy to have Curt here presenting for us. And so quick update on Coral Tech that some of you may be aware of, others can learn a little bit about. But Coral Tech is aiming to be a up-to-date online, like publicly available, just library of what kind of technologies and innovations are out there for coral restoration, whether they are fully developed or it's an idea of something that someone wants to be available. And so it is live at coraltech.world. It's something that anyone that's interested can go ahead and submit their projects with the request for information form that we have on the website. But we're really aiming for this to be, no like advertisement of your product is the best thing or this is the worst thing. It's not us saying, hey, we approve of these technologies. It's just saying, hey, this is everything that's out there, or this is something that someone wants to be developed. And maybe there's someone in this group or out there in the world that has the resources or interest or background to help develop those. And so an opportunity to try and connect some of those people within this community. Everyone that's here is signed up, but to keep up with any updates at crc.world on our engineering and innovation page, there is a link to make sure that you stay up to date. We have started a watch list of all of the presentations from Reef Futures 2022 last September on our YouTube page. I'll send a link out in the chat in just a minute. I was going to have that readily available, but of course I don't. But I'll send a link out into the chat for everyone to be able to check that out if you want to see any of those presentations from Reef Futures that we think might be worthwhile for you all to check out. We're always looking for new presenters for these stakeholder meetings. So if you have any topics or anyone you think would be a great presenter, please touch base with Megan Ramirez. We've got our email address up there. And new exciting announcement is that we have a new interim chair who's going to be helping kind of take over some of the roles and responsibilities that I've been performing, Brooke Elswig. And Brooke, if you want to give us just a quick intro of who you are, just so everyone can meet you.
Absolutely. Hi, guys. I'm Brooke. I come from a background in environmental engineering and have spent the last few years in coral restoration. So I've been a part of the CRC for the last almost 2 years now, and I also have experience doing restoration diving, as well as doing more of the administrative project work with coral restoration. My interest is really in scaling nature-based solutions and looking at the value of coral reefs to protect coastlines. So I'm really looking forward to your talk, Curt. And yeah, just as the interim chair, I look forward to building this community more. And so very grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Brooke. Looking forward to having you on board and just to help keep moving things forward here. And so next we want to do a quick icebreaker activity, kind of similar to what we've done in the past. And of course, again, I don't have the link available, so I'm going to get it real quick and send it out. The idea here is that if we can get everyone just to click on that link in the chat that I just sent out, on this board here, you can make a sticky note with this button and make a sticky note, put in your name, who you're working with, just so that we, the organization you're affiliated with, and which one of these buckets on the board here that you would fit into, just so we can get an idea of who's here. Others can get an idea of those individuals that are present as well. So if we could take a quick minute to do that, we'd appreciate it. And while those are coming in, at the end of this, we're going to send out one last link to you all that we're trying to kind of get a finger on the pulse of, are we doing a good job? Are we performing what seems viable to you all? Is there something that we could do to help provide a better, service to this community? So we'll send out the link for that survey at the end of this, try and get a little bit of a better idea if we are kind of living up to everybody's expectations of us. And so while those are getting filled in, I think we can go ahead and move on to, I'm going to give Curt control of the screen here. And Megan's going to give us a quick introduction of Curt and where he comes from.
Right. Well, as everyone knows, this time we are going to introduce Dr. Curt Storlazzi. Curt is a senior research geologist in the U.S. Geological Survey's Coastal and Marine Hazard and Resources Program that specializes in coastal hydrodynamics and sediment dynamics on tropical coastlines. He presently leads a team examining the geologic and oceanographic processes that affect the growth and vitality of coral reefs, the hazard risk reduction they provide adjacent coastlines, and how climate change and sea level rise will increase flooding hazards to and reduce the resiliency of coral reef line coasts and their associated communities. Curt is currently a United States 5th National Climate Assessment Chapter author on the steering committee for the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force and regularly contributes scientific review for the United States Department of the Interior, Department of State, and Department of Defense, along with the United States and other countries' national science foundations. Curt, thank you for your time, and the microphone is all yours.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate being given the opportunity to present some of the work that we're doing, hopefully to support the work you do. And I'd like to stress that I'm not a restoration practitioner, but I've been working on coral reefs for 20 years and they keep dying. And they keep dying because most people don't appreciate them. And about 10 years ago, my director, the USGS, told me, no one cares about your papers and reports in Congress. They only care about dollars and lives. And especially when we think about the folks inland who maybe have never even seen a coral reef. And so this was an effort to really try to quantify the value of coral reefs in a very place-based way. And hopefully that opens up some funding opportunities for all of you folks to do the great things you do. So today, our presentation's on coral reef restoration for risk reduction. As always, any good science is done in groups of some wonderful people you see here from USGS, UC Santa Cruz, and Del Taurus. And just to acknowledge, this work's funded by the USGS, the Department of the Interior's Office of Insular Affairs, and Department of Defense's Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program. So as we all know, there's a lot of infrastructure and people in coral reef line coasts. Here's just some pictures around the US. And a lot of that infrastructure is really close to the coastline. And that's because we know that coral reefs dissipate a lot of wave energy and protect those coastlines from flooding. The one thing we want to do is to assess that. And so we developed a modeling system to assess the coastal protection value of coral reefs. It's a 12-step program, and like most 12-step programs, it's long and painful, but usually something good comes out of it. And so this is a combination of oceanographic, coastal engineering, ecologic, geospatial, social, and economic models. Really, the gist of it is we can model flooding. So here's a picture of part of Miami, ocean on the right. flooding, this is a 100-year storm. Flooding kind of comes in during, comes through breaks in the beach berm, and you see it flooding down streets. Now, if we can numerically degrade reefs a meter, which is the amount of coral reef loss we've seen across the Caribbean and some of the Pacific Islands, we can rerun those models and the flooding's further inland. So if we think about it, the red area showing up beneath the blue is the area threatened by coral reef degradation, and thus we can say is kind of the value of that. We can cross match that with, in this case, this is FEMA's HAZAS data set on building property value. So that's the weird shapes or the FEMA tracks. Then we could also cross match it with US Census data. So, and we do this for a number of different storms. And so if here, in this case, we did it for the 10-year, 50, 100, and 500-year storms, the blue lines, current reefs, the red lines, degraded reefs. We think about the gray area between those two, that's the benefit of those reefs. We take the integral of that, we can actually get an annualized value. And that's where we did this, again, 10-meter resolution along all 3,000 plus kilometers of US coastline. You see this great, this is the people at annual risk, high spatial variability. Some places people don't live there, some places are, 20-meter high cliffs. Same thing with, this is the dollars. So this is direct damages to building and economic interruption. But again, these are not back of the envelope calculations. This is at 10 meters resolution all over the place. And so these are 2010 dollars because at the time we only had the 2010 census. Obviously, we know coastal populations have grown. And unless you live somewhere I'm not aware of, costs of everything have gone up. So, very easily, these values are much, much larger. So the solution, how do we reduce this? You folks doing your job, coral reef restoration, either through green restoration or gray-green hybrid, putting down some base structure to bring back that high relief and then outplant corals on it. So we can put these same things into our models. So again, here's our flooding, the 100-year return period. Now here's it with potential restoration. Areas smaller. So now in this case, the blue showing up beneath the green is the area that could be protected from coastal flooding by coral reef restoration. Again, we can cross match that with HAZAS data and get a basically the property and economic activity protected. Following the 2017 hurricanes, we get some funding from the Hurricane Supplemental. We did this at, again, 10-meter resolution along all of Florida and Puerto Rico. And here you're starting to see dollars per kilometer. And you see some of those places are above $1 million or above $3 million per kilometer. Some of them are above 15 or $20 million per kilometer. So when you start thinking to yourself, what does it cost me to restore a kilometer of reef? Well, here's a potential benefit for that. And really, this is kind of in our first step is the goal is really to optimize where along the coast to restore a reef to maximize coastal flooding reduction. Then we wanted to think about, okay, well, let's take it to the next step. So again, we did our first survey along all 3,000 kilometers of US coral reef line coasts. We extracted from the LiDAR every 100 meters along the coast a profile. We did put all that into a database and did a cluster analysis to kind of look at what are the 4 main reef types. So we have our typical fringing reef with a distinct reef crest, a convex reef that doesn't really have a reef crest, just a linear reef where it just slopes out to depth, and kind of like a free slope reef where you kind of have like, maybe 10 meters or something like that. You kind of have a platform. What we did then is we put at one at a time, put theoretical restorations at different locations across the reef, ran our flooding models for a range of wave heights and periods to assess kind of like, where do we get the most flood risk reduction benefit of the different locations? Don't worry about all the numbers here, but again, we looked at how things varied by wave height and period and the width of the restoration, the height of the restoration. Really just look at the colors. Red is actually, if you do a restoration, in some cases, you see some areas with red, like this restoration C5 on a convex reef. If you do a restoration too close to shore, you're actually going to increase flooding. But what we're trying to look for is basically areas with a dark green. So that's the greatest run-up reduction. And most of the fringing reefs or convex reefs, that's up on the reef flat. So the goal of this is really, okay, let's start to think of where is the optimal location of restoration on a given reef to maximize coastal flooding reduction. So the next thing we want to do is look at even further, finer scale. With the Aussies at UWA, we conducted the second largest hydrodynamics experiment ever in the world. I'm just showing you 4 instrument locations. We actually had almost 70 across the Molokai fringing reef. You see 2 locations here, these red dots. And in those, we put out some tripods to measure in a high roughness area and a low roughness area to measure hydrodynamics. We basically built an OpenFOAM. So a lot of the coastal models you have are making assumptions, like a grid cell where we're actually not measuring water particles. You're kind of making assumptions, box models. OpenFOAM is actually at the scale of we're measuring water particles. So we made 2 numerical flumes here across our high roughness area or low roughness area. Don't worry about this, but what this is just showing here is we measured cross-shore wave velocities, vertical wave velocities, and turbulence or energy dissipation. We could calibrate and validate our model. That's important. I can make models that show purple elephants fly. You want field data to basically say, is my model working correctly? So we now have working OpenFOAM models. So what I'm showing you here, and this isn't actually the resolution of the model. This is the resolution of the model. I can show that it actually can run video, but we're actually down at basically sub-centimeter scales. At the top's the water surface. So you're going to watch waves come by. Middle panel's wave velocities. The bottom is turbulence or energy dissipation. And so kind of the left side, you see higher relief areas. On the right side of the plot, you're seeing lower relief areas. And what you can kind of see from this is there's more velocity shear or a change in velocity from the open stream velocity down towards the bed with larger roughness, a larger boundary layer associated with that. But more importantly, is you get more turbulence with larger roughness. So turbulence is turbulent kinetic energy dissipation. This is basically the energy being sucked out of the flow by eddies being formed over the roughness things. So basically we have a calibrated and validated model, and we're learning some things about roughness at these scales. If we go back to our modeling, trying to look at the locations, we see that, remember that, the middle of the reef flat is where we typically get some of the highest potential wave height reduction. And if we go back to a lot of the work that's been done over the past 15 years, as waves move from offshore, which is the top here, to onshore, waves out in the open ocean are what we call the sea swell band, 5 to 25 seconds. But once they start breaking the reef crest, as you move onshore, you pump more energy into these lower frequencies, which we call this the infragravity band, 25 to 250 seconds or even lower in the very low frequency band. And because run up, how much water rushes up the beach face is a function of wave period, these longer period infragravity, very low frequency waves are very important for coastal flooding. And so if we want to reduce wave-driven flooding, we really want to keep sure that whatever we do in terms of restoration, if we're going to restore, say, a reef flat, we need to focus on those infragravity waves. So what we did is we went back, and now we have our calibrated vet model. We went out and basically put hemispheres in the model. And we basically made them certain heights, and we wanted to space them, and whether these hemispheres are some kind of boulder coral or reef ball or whatever. So we put them in there. What we want to do is vary them, vary the spacing, because basically spacing is density, density is cost, right? You put more corals out, cost more, fewer corals cost less. So again, we did uniform spacing. Now you're watching these long infragravity waves cross over our field of coral balls here. And if we collapse all that information down, and here we're looking, basically all these are showing turbulence. Again, sucking energy out. Y-axis is depth. The top rows are wave heights. The colors are wave periods. The different shading is the element spacings or our density. And don't worry about the plots. The big thing to take away is that we get more turbulence for larger waves. Makes sense. Bigger waves, more turbulence. Less turbulence for longer periods, because basically as the period gets longer, its wavelength relative to the element spacing is much bigger, and thus it kind of feels less of it. And most importantly, more turbulence for smaller element spacing. So more corals you put out, more turbulence, right? You got that. Now, if we collapse all of this down, if again, we're looking at now time and space average turbulence here on the y-axis. So the lower the numbers, the more negative is the better the thing, right? We want to suck more turbulence out of the system. And now on the x-axis, we're looking at element density. So high density on the right side of the plots, left side of the plots, low density. And so what we see is low density, the percent change is low. And as we go towards increasing density, the amount of energy sucked out increases. So that's good. However, what we know, and again, real quick, columns are wave height, colors are wave period, and again, the shading is the spacing. So that higher density sucks out more energy, right? But we also know that cost increases with density. So what we're trying to really do here is kind of say for a given reef and a given set of waves, you know, kind of where's that sweet spot? Where do we find a minimum between those two? Is trying to provide some guidance, like, hey, if the infragravity wave heights on this reef flat on average are 15 centimeters high, and we need, you know, 40% reduction, okay, here's our minimum spot. Okay, we go to a certain density of spacing. So try to kind of balance those two, really to kind of evaluate the energy dissipation to guide outplanning design. So again, trying to maximize dissipation and thus reduce the hazard while minimizing the size and the number of elements, which is cost, right? So that's down to the centimeter scale. So the next steps, you know, one of the things we're doing, you guys doing restoration, one of the cool things is NOAA started to do restoration off Palomino Island off Puerto Rico. And we just, you know, they started it last year. They're out putting out Palmata. We basically, with the University of Puerto Rico, just did a series of measurements across this restoration area, which is in green, and we measured the wave heights and water levels. Now we're going to go back in 3 years and 6 years as those corals grow and see how that restoration is actually reducing wave energy. Because one of the big things is groups want to do this. You know, Army Corps Spellman, the head of Army Corps, is like, restoration, we want to do engineering with nature. But at the end of the day, a professional engineer has to sign off on something and they have no data. So we're starting to collect these data. The big DARPA Reef Fence program is another place where we're going to be collecting field data to show the performance of restoration so that an engineer, professional engineer, can sign off on these things. So why does all this matter? Because the US funds pre-disaster mitigation and post-disaster recovery via benefit cost analysis. And so that's a hazard risk reduction versus cost. Obviously, you see in this flooding, you know, as our flooding models, we can compute the hazard risk reduction, the cost. Please, folks, this is your area of expertise. I have no clue about cost, but some of the things I've read is anywhere from $500,000 to $3 or $4 million per kilometer. And it needs to be done in a spatially resolution, economically rigorous manner to meet, at least in the US, the Stafford Act and OMB Circular A94. Nice thing is this data does meet that criteria. So we can provide guides, at least at the kilometer scale, of maybe where a longshore to do it. Well, why is this important? Because then all the legal and financial tools used to fund gray infrastructure, such as seawalls, breakwaters, then can be used to fund green infrastructure, such as coral reef restoration. So, these restoration funds, mitigation grants, green bonds, special purpose tax districts, catastrophe bonds, resilience bonds, all these tools could be used then to fund coral reef restoration. And reminding folks that the US spends $500 million annual on flood mitigation, and we spend billions on recovery following disasters. So maybe if we could take a little of that and direct it into reef restoration. Again, there's lots of reasons to restore coral reefs. I'm just saying, if you want to tap into some of these big funds, if we can do it in areas that can reduce coastal flooding, then we might open up some really large opportunities. And so right now, like I said, there's pre-disaster mitigation funds. FEMA's BRIC program, building resistant infrastructure communities, is $2.3 billion this year alone. The bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, those are also in the billions of dollars. So some opportunities, but that means really we need to prioritize natural infrastructure and policy. And that is something we're doing. We're trying to, a group of us on the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force are trying to get legislation passed that designates U.S. coral reefs as national natural infrastructure. And if so, then that really opens us up. On the private side, insurance and resilience bonds, and that the private sector is starting to look at this like, hey, you destroy the reef off your hotel, we're going to jack up your insurance rates. And conversely, you protect your reef, maybe we're going to reduce your insurance rates. And so we need to work better on including nature in industry risk models. So in summary, coral reef restoration can be optimized to protect coastal communities. Hydrodynamics and numerical model can help guide restoration design for hazard risk reduction. And if the hazard risk reduction role of coral reefs can be taken into account, it can open up tens of millions to billions of dollars for coral reef restoration. And so hopefully I've shown you how we're trying to kind of link coral reef health and restoration to hazard risk reduction to reduce the risk to and increase the resiliency of our coastal communities, while at the same time providing all those other ecosystem services, species diversity and richness, fisheries, recreation, and tourism. So thank you, and available for questions.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Curt. If people want to raise their hands or just unmute themselves and speak into the mic, please go ahead. Curt, I'm just kind of curious about you were mentioning the designating the U.S. reefs as, what did you say, national infrastructure?
National natural infrastructure.
National natural infrastructure. Is that just ultimately reclassifying them with how the federal government views these systems, or how is that done?
Good. I'm a scientist, so I'm not exactly clear. We showed all this kind of work, and Assistant Administrator LeBeouf at NOAA, basically the head of NOS, and Assistant Secretary Cantor at DOI is like, okay, well, all these people want to do this, but we don't want infrastructure funds. So figure out how to do this. And what's interesting is actually Puerto Rico in 2021 declared their reefs as critical infrastructure. Hawaii's got a bill to do that right now. And so they're already trying to designate their reefs to try to tap into these. But then the federal government says, we should do this for all reefs. And, there's this big push, the White House came out in late 22 to accelerate nature-based solutions. And it quoted this research here on coral reef restoration, hundreds of millions in Puerto Rico and Florida. And so everything's lining up to do it. But at the end of the day, it needs to be that's defined as it. And so we don't know how to write legislation. That's not our job. But what we're doing is just saying, hey, here's the basis for it. Here's the language that the folks in Puerto Rico and others have done, and then it gets passed off to someone else to make it happen. So, yeah,
Gotcha.
sorry, I can't explain that.
No, that's fine. That's just like a kind of a curiosity piece, but also I think that's like a really important piece of this is, as we're starting to see more and more funding being put towards these projects, we need those classifications and justifications for people to continue to fight for that, but also the modeling as you're doing here to have the data behind why it's actually necessary. That's awesome. Colleen does have a hand up. Colleen, if you want to unmute yourself and jump in.
Okay. Hi.
There you go.
Thank you guys. And hi, Curt. Good to see you. We've spoken here before in California, and I wanted to ask if, since we last spoke, I remember you had said that the density, that something like 3 feet or 3 meters and this type of height, like there was some for the various practitioners here, like having any concrete numbers if there's been advances, or like this is sort of a good place in your placement of an artificial reef or corals to really, if, like you said, you're optimizing budget versus planting or reefscaping. Do you have some sort of numbers for?
Well, what I was showing you is it kind of depends on your wave climate and your water depth. And so that's what we want to try to produce, is kind of some guidance on that, because it's going to vary. We can't just say, okay, 3 diameters or 8 meters or something like that. It really is going to depend on that environment. And that's one of the things we're looking to do with the DARPA Reef Fence project, is sit there and start doing like real big 3D simulations. Like those 2D simulations, those are 2 weeks on a supercomputer. And then we need to actually go, because your real designs are 3 dimensions and we need to do that. And so that's one of the things we're looking to do over the next couple of years, is to say, okay, for a whole range of wave heights and water depths and wave periods, really to provide kind of those performance envelopes, what it'd be, right? For a wave height and a period and a certain water depth, okay, you have 60% energy reduction, 80%, 90%. Because again, you're all going to have to balance these things, like.
But so could you be sending like some sort of 3-dimensional modeling of like different, like say you have like 5 different sort of artificial reef, organic, undulating niche, different type of structures. We could try to find a way to model that with the wave, with whatever programs that you're advancing at some point, is kind of where the engineering is going.
Yeah. But again, I think what we do is we do it kind of schematically, because I don't think everyone can do it. I mean, can you afford,
no,
hundreds of thousands of hours of supercomputer time? Probably not. So that's our job as the government, I think, and we're trying to do this again, is to provide some of those simulations to be like, okay, well, mine's kind of between these 2 cases or something.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, but I would say this is, when we've done our theoretical simulations, we're basing these in reality. It's not like, oh, we have a 100-meter wide or 300-meter wide reef flat that we're modeling coral restoration across that whole thing. We realize if you're going to do it, something like green restoration is maybe 20 meters wide, and then along shore, or if it's structural, maybe it's only 5 meters wide and along shore, because that's kind of what we understand. We're not making up weird stuff like, oh yeah, let's do 1 kilometer wide of coral reef restoration along 50 kilometers of coast. Like, that's never going to happen. So just let you know, as we're doing these kind of simulations, we're hey, man, if you want sexual propagation, great. But I'm saying what people are actually going to go out and glue down or bolt down or something, like, we're trying to keep reality somewhere involved.
Absolutely. I sent a link out to those that are unaware of the program, of just like a synopsis of the DARPA program that Curt was mentioning, just so if anyone doesn't know about it, they're aware. And Matthew sent out a comment just that he has some very similar engineering analysis that his organization uses. Matthew, if that is something you get permission to share in the future, we'd be very interested in having you come on and present on it for one of these stakeholder meetings. Yeah.
I would just
Go
like to
ahead.
know, Michael Nemeth's here from NOAA. That restoration, I was saying that they did off, that we showed we're working on. That's Michael, not that group's gang. So Mike, good to see you, bud.
Yeah, thanks, Curt. Great presentation. Super interesting, and thanks for the call out to that work in Puerto Rico. Wow, so much to do and learn about. Yeah, hopefully, if the corals will do their thing and grow, and we'll be looking at a few years to get some real data, to share with you and others. To see some real results and keep moving it forward. So, yeah, it's just one test. There's a lot to do, but yeah, I look forward to continue to move forward with that.
And so that's what's neat is, this Michael and his group's outplanting of just palmadas of pure green, and then DARPA's reef fences are these gray-green hybrids. So we're starting to build, again, this data set that, again, the engineers will need to be able to sign off on any of these. So work is invaluable.
Jamie just commented in, where can we find the papers referenced in your presentations, Curt?
I guess I could either put them in the chat afterwards, or I can
or
send
Curt,
them
you
to
can,
folks.
yeah, send them to Megan and we can send it out with the follow-up email to the group. And so I had a quick question with respect to the numbers that you were using. You had like a $500,000 to $3 million quote there. Where are those numbers coming from?
I'm sorry, and I've got a horrible last name, so I apologize for butchering her name, but Barakat, man, she presented at ICRS in Bremen. Okay. She's got Barakat. I'm sorry, it's an Eastern European, and I'm Italian, so I'm really bad at that. I apologize. I'm not trying to butcher her name, but she did a review article. And also, I've just a bunch of other folks, I've seen like, oh, the Nature Conservancy throws out some numbers, and here's a number here or there. The problem with all these numbers is we have to be realistic. You could be like, reef balls with this, and exact cost, but that cost to build them in Miami and deploy them is different from that cost even to do it in Puerto Rico, let alone to do it in Guam. And so those are just rough round numbers. It's as low as this, as high as this. To be honest, actually, the DARPA program has a number of $350 per meter, so that'd be 3.5 million per kilometer. So whatever those numbers, I was just making up some numbers, but
just trying to give some values to it.
Yeah. Okay. And so, for like, hey, so if sections of coastline say are $3 or $4 million per kilometer, then okay, that benefit cost ratio is pretty close. Again, also noting that our numbers, I wouldn't say are garbage, but they're really low because A, they're 10 years old. B, they're at this large block number, and we use FEMA's HAZUS database. They have, the people in FEMA don't even use their own database. They use NSVI, which is the National Structure Inventory or something. Yes, Jessica Levy, thank you. Elisa, yes, sorry, thank you. That's the correct woman. I apologize.
That is a challenging name to say.
Yeah,
you did a great job.
And I went up to her like a little kid at ICRS. I was like, "Oh, it's so pleasure to meet you." Like, wow, old guy with white hair is excited to meet young person. But yes, that was a great review paper she did. But yes, those numbers again can be done, and that's again where this proposal into FEMA for Florida is to get much more accurate numbers. And again, all those numbers are going to go up because costs of everything gone up, density of people and structures have gone up, and just the higher accuracy. So, and the other thing is we're not taking into account is that, the U.S. government's making a big push to better recognize basically the, into benefit cost analysis is how do we do that for low-income folks and minorities. And one of the things I'd like to point out, I didn't show this presentation, but we're about to submit in the next week or so a paper to Nature on this, is we always show flooding, like I was showing you, it always floods the coast, and actually restoration protects the areas further inland. Both across Florida and Puerto Rico, the areas, the people protected by restoration that are the ones further inland are 2 to 4 times the general population of children, elderly, low income, and minorities. And so that's a very important thing, because that makes coral reef restoration an environmental justice issue. And the US government's trying to really do a much better job of addressing environmental justice issues and, environmental disparity. And so there's another benefit. How they're going to quantify that is going to be very interesting. So again, these values. Another thing, I have a student I actually met in Bremen in Germany at ICRF. These areas that could be flooded, we're just, hey, here's destruction of a gas station. Well, what about the potential contamination associated with that and the cleanup costs? Water treatment plants, septic systems, all those things. So again, I think our numbers are extremely low. Like, not extremely low, are very low. And so, so there's a lot of other things that are also going to play into those benefit cost analyses.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and wow. I'm not seeing any more hands up at the moment. We don't have any more questions in the chat. So Curt, thank you very much for your presentation. Oh, Michael's got his hand up now.
Yeah, at the last minute. Just Curt, I was just reading the paper that you recently published with Toth and others, and the process of reef accretion calcification, and it's just another variant of this question, and I'm looking for the way we can maximize the ecological benefits with all these other benefits, and just curious about your thoughts on corals as kind of like little concrete plants out there in the ocean, putting down material that, if they survive, I mean, there's a big if with climate change and all the projections, right? I mean, I guess that maybe more of a comment than a question about that seems like a huge part of this equation. It's adaptability and resilience in the coral populations to have them continue providing that service is just a comment there.
Yeah, damn straight. I mean, if the coral reefs are gone, something caused them to die, and we don't want to put the canary back in the coal mine. One of the biggest things we can do is reduce local stressors, right? I mean, I don't think we're going to stop China and US and India doing fossil fuel emissions, although we should do everything we can. One of the first things is let's reduce those local stressors to be able to make them more resilient to those global stressors. There's a lot of examples of corals that, God, you can go into the nastiest, go into Miami Harbor, you can go into any place. There's some corals that make it, even under these really bad situations. What can we learn from them? I'm also working on an OFU in American Samoa, where those corals are in like 36 degrees seawater or something like that. What can we learn from that? And that's one of the great things about all the research that the National Science Foundation, especially DARPA, is doing. One of the goals of the Reef Fence program is to make corals grow faster, make them resilient up to 2 to 3 degrees Celsius higher water temperatures than they are now. And so there's going to have to be some stuff done like that. But, as Terry Hughes and folks have shown, like, you get every person in the world doing coral reef restoration, you're not going to be outplant enough corals. We're going to have to get them to the point of sexually propagating. And so there are some tough things to be done there, Michael. And all I can say is I hope you folks all figure it out. But hopefully, again, this kind of work we're doing is providing some funding to hopefully help expand that, make it work, and also just to make people care, right? You know, like that's the big thing to me is I always felt like, oh, people be like, oh, I care about diversity, and be like, yeah, but that diversity is some other reef over there, so I can damage this reef, or oh, the best fishing's over there. That's the nice thing. This hazards, like this reef protects these communities, and I think it really links people a lot better, and maybe makes them understand and care. Put it this way: DeSantis just put $10 million into the Florida budget primarily for hazard risk reduction by coral reefs. And that was all driven by the economics. I don't think he's the biggest coral hugger, but and Wesley Brooks, as chief resilience officer, basically said it was the economics. So we all love corals for a lot of other reasons, but to make people in government care about it, a lot of times it's going to be these numbers. And so there's a lot of things we've got to do better on along those lines, you know, better tie fisheries, you know, what is the value of you know, diversity and things like that. You know, we gotta show the value of the reefs better to get people behind us. So that's just, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
I love that term, coral hugger. I haven't heard that one yet. Well, with that, thank you all for joining us. I'm sending out in the chat right now a link to just a quick form for if we could request everyone to jump in and just fill that out. It's just briefly, just kind of an assessment on if you have been to some of these meetings before, or if this is your first one as well, how you feel that we're doing, if there are other services, other things that we can provide to this community, other ways that we can get involved, other, you know, just we're trying to look at ways to improve ourselves and keep supporting you all to continue networking and building what we hope is better opportunities for our coral reefs. So thank you all for joining. Thanks for filling out that form. Curt, thank you so much for your presentation. Really appreciate it. Really fascinating. And I learned a lot today. So thank you all. We'll talk to you soon. And we'll send out my original slides. We'll send the recording of this meeting, and Curt is going to give us links to those papers that he mentioned.